What's going on, everybody? It is Monday. It is December. Can you believe we're already in December? 11 months down, 1 month left of 2025 before it's in the books. And we were going to be talking a little bit about a summary of that later in the episode. So check that out. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. You got to spend some time, had safe travels, all that good stuff. On Wednesday, if you missed it during the Thanksgiving festivities, I posted an episode that I am so excited that I was able to share about this incredible collection, truly incredible collection of a fellow Northern California family. This was the, how do I even describe it? It is the Godfather's father. So the collector who found the channel, who kind of discovered what the collection was all about. His godfather is the current owner of the card, and it was his godfather's dad's collection. And a few of those cards, a fair amount of those cards, are now available for preview on the CIA auction this month. Later in the week, I'm going to do my monthly episode with my buddy Theo, who is now working with CIA, to take a look at all of the things that are available. That auction goes live on Thursday, I believe. So that's probably going to be the day that the episode posts on the preview. We'll take a look at some of the cards from this Godfather collection, show you how to find them. I wasn't sure which cards were going to be submitted into the auction. And it wasn't a huge number of cards. Now that the preview is up, I actually finally got to look through and see. But some big cards of Cobb, Ruth, Speaker, Walter Johnson, big name cards are in this auction. We'll take a look again at that later in the week. But first, there's been hobby drama. We know that. I'm kind of burned out on the hobby drama. What I am ready for is hobby solutions. I am ready to talk about what needs to be fixed and how can we fix it? What are some steps that we could take to make the hobby in a healthier place again? I think there are a lot of people in the hobby right now. I think there's a lot of money in the hobby right now, but I don't necessarily think that it's in the best emotional state if a hobby can have an emotion. It feels to me like we're a little bit in disarray, not knowing what to believe, not knowing what not to believe, what's real, what's not real. And so I asked last week what I think is an important question. And that question is, if you had a magic wand, what is the one thing that you would fix? There are problems, there is drama, there are issues. But again, with the mindset of next steps, what can we do? Well, what's the one thing that you would fix? And if you can identify the one thing or the two things that you think need fixing the most, that helps in determining next steps. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to your responses. And I am very, you guys surprised me. You guys surprised me again with some of the things that you said. There was one response I absolutely was not expecting, and it was the most common response. But first, let's take a look at this response here.
Some people said auction houses need to evolve. This comment says, if I could change one thing in the hobby, it would be to eliminate all auctions for sports cards on every platform. End all bidding, period. Make every platform buy it now or best offer only. Negotiate with the seller and get the best deal you can get. This will make comps much more accurate and eliminate all shill bidding. I believe the shady and illegal practice of shill bidding has ruined the integrity of auctions and comps. The only way to fix it is to eliminate auctions. My good buddy Dan of Dan's Vintage Baseball PC says, for next week, my one change is complete bidding transparency on all auction houses. Give us the names of the people we are bidding against. Yes, there are privacy issues, but if you sign up to bid on an auction houses can condition registration on allowing the use of your name in the bidding. It won't solve all the hijinks, but it will greatly decrease shill bidding and provide us with an opportunity to know important information.
Okay, so I thought auction houses might come up. And I think that there are definitely some surprises. Now that the curtain has been pulled back a little bit about auction houses and what sorts of things are happening, about how a lot of them have house bidding and they have reserves that are hidden until the last minute, until some, and the fact that some of them you can even bid on your own items that you've consigned. And we've heard from several auction houses. I've seen interviews with auction house owners on Dan Vintage PC channel, who just left a comment, Tony Southern Collector 14, Jeremy Lee. And I've watched all of these and I've been excited to be able to hear how their auction houses work, these particular owners of auction houses. You know, you guys know I'm buddies with Theo over at CIA, so I've asked him a lot of questions about what's allowed and not allowed with them. And I think where we find ourselves is because there are so many different rules, because there are so many different platforms, and we think, oh, it's an auction house, so they must all be the same. They're not the same, and we're starting to find out some information. Our buddy John, 3D80s kid, he kind of did some investigating. He did an episode and released a spreadsheet on some of the findings that he had on what is and isn't allowed. Jeremy Lee, we found out, is finishing up a book, which is going to be released soon, that has a whole bunch of different topics, one of which is auction houses and some of the rules. And there's an appendix in there that's going to talk about what some of the auction houses do and don't do. And even in some of Jeremy's questions, as he's talked about, what is happening is by pointing out some of the concerns that the collecting community has, some of these auction houses have even started to make a few changes. And so because they've started to make some changes, it to me at least feels like a lot of them are open to that. A lot of them are open to, okay, we can tweak things. And that's why this magic wand question is something that I'm curious about, because if there's something that the hobby community really wants and is going to demand from the auction houses, I have a feeling that some of them at least will adapt to those desires. Because remember, an auction house can have the best items up for consignment, but if they don't have anybody willing to bid, they're not going to get their prices. And if they're not going to get their prices, people aren't going to consign to them. So sure, the auction houses have a lot of the power. They get to decide what they're consigning. They get to decide their rules. But we, the community, we get to impact it as well. Because without our bids, without our interest, without us checking out what is up for auction, they don't have bidders to buy the things that are for sale. And they won't get their commissions from their consigned items. So I think we have more power than people realize. Now, one of the things that happened is there was a live stream. It was on Jeremy Lee's channel, and an auction house owner was on there. And he said flat out, he said something that kind of I was discouraged by. He said the bidders have no right to the information, and I'm paraphrasing. But he said, the bidders have no right to the information of who's bidding. We do. And I was not thrilled to hear that. See, I'm kind of like Dan. Dan just said there needs to be full transparency on who's bidding. Who am I bidding against? I kind of think that. Now, does an auction house have to do that? Can an auction house come out and say, well, yeah, we're not going to tell you who's bidding. We're going to keep that a secret. It might be us. It might be them. It might be anybody. We're not going to tell you that information. They absolutely have that right because they get to make their rules. But we have the right to say, I don't like your rules, so I'm going to go do a different auction house. And that's one of the things that I hope starts to happen. See, what I believe is it's like the chicken and the egg. What comes first? Do the big consignment items show up at an auction house because of the auction house, Or do the bidders show up because of the big consigned items? Or do the big consigned items sell for a lot because they have the bidders? See, I think in actuality, the auction houses think they're in control. They think they have all the power. And right now they do because we've given it to them. But if we as a collective community were to say, nope, I'm not using your auction house anymore, and all the bidders go away, the consigners are not going to consign with them anymore. We can actually force their hand. It's the same thing with the whole PSA thing. PSA, they're wildly inconsistent. PSA is taking forever. They're raising their prices. We know all the stuff. But as long as they continue month after month to hit new records of the most number of cards graded in a single month, they don't have to change. The only way to get any company to change is by us changing our habits. So I definitely think demanding that there's more transparency, and if they don't provide it, then we actually can take the power back. Now, would that be difficult to do? It would. It would be difficult to do that. But when I heard that owner of that auction house say, you don't have the right to know, we pay money for that right, we have a business to own the rights to that, you're right, you do. And I have the right to go somewhere else. If you are going to be so smug that you are going to say, yeah, I don't have to share with you anything. I can do whatever I want. Okay, good to know. Good to know. But I now know that about this auction house. So I just think that we continue to complain. And that's what I feel like most of November was, is it was complaining about shill bidding, complaining about the auction houses, complaining about how people are admitting that their friends bid up each other's items. And we just go, I can't believe this. This is despicable. This is terrible. I agree. So what are we going to do? Now, I have a couple of ideas. I've talked to a few people. There are some things that I know people want to start rolling out, and I think people should start rolling out ideas to start to inform collectors. See, that's one of the main things, is it's not particular. It's easy to access the rules of the auction houses. You can find it on their websites, but it's a lot to read, and a lot of people aren't willing to go auction house by auction house and actually figure it all out. So I think one of the main things we need to do, in addition to demanding transparency, like Dan mentions, is we also need to start becoming more aware. And that's one of the reasons I had Jeremy Lee on last week to talk about some of this. It's one of the reasons I'm excited about his book coming out, because it will put a spotlight on some of this information. But I am going to ask other content people out there, other people with channels, start going through the auction houses. Start sharing what they do and they don't do. Because if you are going to a restaurant every week and you like the restaurant, but then you find out that what you thought was beef was actually something else, you might change your habits. And some of these auction houses, they might act like they're serving you beef, but it might actually be spoiled beef. So I think that we need to start getting informed. I think that we need to start demanding certain transparencies. I will talk about this some with Theo later in the week about, hey, tell us more about CIA. Tell us about, do they allow this? Do they allow this? Do they allow this? Because I think it's important to know. Theo's my friend, so it's easy to get him to come on and have these conversations. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say later in the week. But we actually have the power, because without bidders, those consignments are never going to hit those reserves that are hidden in the background that nobody knows about, and nothing's going to sell. So I know that the auction houses think they have control. And let me throw in one more thing. You know, one of the things I talked about with Jeremy, and I was very enlightened on, I was completely naive to, I didn't know, is that Auction houses have been around for 150 plus years. And auction houses have had some of these rules about house bidding, about hidden reserves, about a wide variety of these different things. They've had those things in place for 150 years. And so what a lot of the internet auction houses did is they utilized those rules that worked for them. But that doesn't mean that auction houses don't need to evolve. There was a time that people used horseback for their main mode of transportation, or a covered wagon, or a buggy pulled by a horse or two. But now we use automobiles with combustion engines, or maybe an electric motor that pulls us around by the motor turning, and there is electricity that is created. It's different. It has evolved. A lot of things have evolved in the past 150 years. So for an auction house to come out and tell me, well, we've been doing this for 150 years, that's not a good answer to me. That's not a good answer. I don't care what happened 150 years ago. That is not an excuse for what is happening now.
Several people said monopolies are ruining things. My buddy the High Pop Professor says, great videos always, Greg. I have a couple of answers for what I would do with a magic wand to improve the hobby. The first choice would be break up the card license monopoly and bring back Pinnacle, Upper Deck, Donruss, Fleer, Pacific, etc. Getting some more competition seems like a great way to promote innovation again and get people interested in different types of cards. Fanatics has gotten pretty tone deaf lately and seems to care more about their casino than on producing cards to fuel a robust collecting community. This would allow us as collectors to vote with our dollars on better licensed products if we don't like Fanatics' offering. Another choice would my magic wand would be to impact graded cards in some way. I can't decide whether it would be better to wave a wand and change every gem mint slabbed card into mint card, as the concept gem mint is fake anyway, or maybe with my magic wand, I would have every slabbed card in existence instantly converted to something like a computer-graded assisted tag holder that would be 100% accurate and the card's actual condition. And upon cracking and resubmits, would always return the exact same computer-assisted grade every time. This would eliminate all need for cracking and resubbing cards again and again. There, I just fixed the combined set registry problem for you. This one says, well, Greg, in general, it makes sense that the auction houses care more about consigners than the bidders. The consigners are the ones paying the auction houses. If I could wave a magic wand and change one thing in the new hobby landscape, I would break up some of these monopolies forming in the hobby. Collectors, aka PSA, and Fanatics, and bring back competition. And this one says, if I had a magic wand, I would break up the many card monopolies being formed, especially Collectors Universe and Fanatics. Yes, there are other grading companies, but none have the influence in the hobby than PSA. In order to grade a card, you now have to wait a lifetime to get your card graded, plus spend a fortune. I dropped off 3 cards to be reholdered at the Chantilly show in October, and they show they have not even been received. PSA is now the main seller on eBay, besides being eBay's authenticator. They also are in auction businesses, owning golden auctions. Fanatics the same, as they will be the only company licensed by the NBA, MLB, and NFL to produce cards. They also own their own site, and without a doubt will dip into grading in the future. Too much power in too few hands puts the future of the hobby in question.
I am like most red-blooded Americans, and I believe in competition. And I believe that competition improves quality. I think that it improves customer service. I think that it improves innovation. And there is no doubt that over the last 18 months in the hobby, there has been a huge consolidation. And even the places where there wasn't a purchase from one company or of one company by another company, even though maybe eBay didn't purchase collectors or PSA, maybe they didn't buy out, PW's. Well, they did. Fanatics did buy PWCC. ComC wasn't purchased by eBay yet or PSA yet. What has happened is they're so connected that they're basically controlled. I remember talking and doing case studies in college. And I remember how they were talking about why does Walmart get such good prices from the producers of products. And I remember the quote that my professor said. He said, imagine sitting across the table from two 300-pound gorillas. How much leverage are you going to have? When somebody is so big and powerful, like Walmart is in, the selling of items and goods, how are you going to say, nope, we're not going to take your price? You're kind of going to cave. And when PSA is a huge customer and huge producer of revenue for eBay, what's eBay going to say? And vice versa. And ComC, what are they going to say? Oh no, PSA, we won't take that deal. Oh no, GameStop, we won't take that deal, PSA, because, we don't make enough money from, they're going to take the deal. See, the thing with a monopoly is, even if they're not a monopoly, even if there is a quote unquote competitor, if you are so overwhelmingly powerful in what you could do to a different company's bottom line, you basically get to do whatever you want. And that's essentially what's happening. If you think about the junk wax era, right? So what happened? This is what happened with cards. When the antitrust lawsuit was settled and there was Fleer and Donruss and Topps back in the early 80s, the way that they started is they just printed. They just produced and produced and produced and produced. And then what happened is they realized we're just producing over and over and people are kind of getting bored of this. And then once we got to like the mid to late 90s, even a couple of times in early 90s, but I'll say mid 90s, innovation happened. A lot of things changed. We started having memorabilia cards. We started having numbered cards. We started having refractor cards. We started having chrome cards. Things changed. Insert cards. What was happening was a huge shift in innovation. They started by just producing. And then they said, we're producing, but we're not getting ahead. We're just more available. And when we're more available, we're cheaper because we flooded the market. So what can we do? We're going to innovate. And if you look at some of those cards from the mid 90s, they are really the transformational cards and sets and innovations that we still have. Even though it's now Topps and Fanatics, only one of which being licensed. It's not good for the hobby to have all the power in a couple of places. Now, sure, there are economies of scale. There are some, they're able to produce things and use some of their synergies by the size that they have. But the innovation is gone. When was the last major innovation? I mean, people are going crazy about the patch cards from like the debut patch cards that Topps did. I mean, that's like the first innovation that we've had in a card. And is that an innovation? I mean, I guess, but we've had patch cards for 25 years, more than 25 years. We've had patch cards. So all it is now is, Gee, imagine this. It's a patch that was actually worn by the person. Whoa, instead of one off of a clothing rack from Dick's Sporting Goods and thinking that was supposed to be cool. It feels like the innovation is in a drought. It feels like prices aren't coming down. It feels like a monopoly because, I don't know, it is. It is a monopoly of who can do what. And this doesn't just go for the producers of cards. As Larry said at the end there, PSA may not technically be a monopoly, but they're a 300-pound gorilla. And I mean, when PSA decides they want to do something, they just do it. How do you negotiate with that when they have all the power right now? How do you do anything when they have all of the power? So Larry drops off his cards in person at the Chantilly show in October. It's December now. It's December. He dropped them off in October and it doesn't even show that they've been processed. I mean, that is completely unheard of. Why doesn't it show that they've processed? Because they don't have to process it quickly. They don't have to be consistent. It's discouraging. Monopolies, again, I don't want to say that all big companies are bad, because a lot of big companies do allow for some ease of use. I mean, PSA's app is really good now because they have the money to actually have a team of software engineers to make a good app. If they were a mom and pop grader, we wouldn't have the ease of submitting cards and looking up serial numbers and certs like we do. Like, the apps are pretty darn good. And they're pretty darn good because they're big companies. So there is some good that comes out of it. But then there comes a point where growth gets stunted. And a lot of the innovations to the PSA app were happening as SGC was launching and innovating their own app. Some of the stuff that has been innovation over the last few years is not just because they wanted to just make things easier for us because they're looking out for us. It's also because they did have a serious competitor that they have since swallowed up and which they have since dismantled. It's discouraging. Monopolies are a problem. The one thing I'll say, though, before I stop talking about this, and by the way, this is the one I was surprised on. I was not expecting people to say all the monopolies, break them up. I was not expecting that to be the most popular response. But I guess at the end of the day, the question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Because I think that everybody did a great job right there of laying out that monopolies are reducing innovation, that monopolies are making it take longer to get our cards reholdered, that monopolies are not in our best interest. But with the first one that we had, with the first topic that we talked about, people were saying solutions. And I want all of us, myself included, to get out of the rut of the complaining and start to move into the problem solving and action phase. So what can we do about this one? What can we do about the monopolies that are popping up and taking over control of everything? That I didn't hear a lot of, but I'm curious to hear about. All right, there was one more category. Let's talk about that one here.
And some people said we need grading company changes. This first one says, magic wand waving. My change. vintage sports cards would have an equivalent condition scale as our brethren in the numismatic hobby use, which is the Sheldon scale. This scale would come from a society, panel, or consortium of dealers and established collector authorities, not the grading companies. This group would periodically rate the grading companies on how well they are holding to the scale and publish the results. As in numismatics, this would create a feedback loop that would standardize the grading criteria for all graders. It would use their own reputations as a motivating factor to move them to a more equal application of this standard. Finally, it would offer a safeguard against a grading company having its application of the standard shift over time. And finally, this one says, your question is easy, but difficult. If I could wave a magic wand, I would get rid of grading. Only have authentication services to know the card is real and hasn't been tampered with.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with the numismatics grading consortium, but I am familiar with my buddy Chris Hoge the other day, who said, one of the ways to increase the auction houses' accountability and to encourage them to start worrying more about the bidder and not just the consignor is to have some sort of rating system, some sort of conglomerate, some sort of group. I mean, if I want to buy a car, I can go to the Consumer Reports and see how those cars are rated by an independent group. They can tell me the reliability of the car, the pros and the cons, what the ratings are on each of the features. And I can get information, and it's become a somewhat universal thing that there are ways to figure out if I want to buy a dishwasher, which dishwasher should I buy? If I want to buy a refrigerator, if I want to buy a car, if I want to buy a television, and it's not just Consumer Reports, right? There's, Edmunds, and there's different things for cars, and each industry has their own as well. But with these services, with the services in this industry of cards, grading services, there's no rating system. There's no oversight. There's no oversight. There's no rating system. There's no accountability. All there is a guy like me or you who sets up his phone on a tripod on a couple of pillows and sits on his bed and looks into his phone and he says, man, I feel like I got ripped off on these grades. But that doesn't really move the needle. There's not a Consumer Reports. There's not a way for people to go, well, who should I use? What are the pros and cons of each? And if there are things like that, like, sure, there's an article here or there's a post here, there's nothing that at the moment is actually changing behavior. And it's not just grading companies we need that for. It's like Hoge mentioned, we also need that for auction houses. We need it for all of the different areas. Heck, what about having it for hobby supplies, right? We have hobby supplies. Like, you've got all these different companies that make hobby supplies, and which one is the highest quality and the cheapest priced and the fastest shipping and lasts the longest and has the least issues? We don't have it for anything in our hobby. A lot of us spend lots of money on our hobby. We fly across the country multiple times a year. We pay for hotel fees and airfares. We spend tons of money on cards. And then we have all these companies that are completely controlling it, like we just talked about, these monopolies. But there's nobody holding them accountable. There's nobody calling them out. There's no Consumer Reports. Why? How is it that hasn't happened? even the apps. You guys know that I am a partner with Card Ladder. And I really like Card Ladder. And I've had people, even in the last week, I've had people reach out to me and go, why do you like Card Ladder over VCP? And I go, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So will you show me? So I go on with them and I show them the features that I use, how I use them. And they're like, oh, I didn't know about that. There is this huge industry that we have. It is a huge industry. Why? What about the consumer reports on the different card shows, the pros and the cons of all the different shows? A list of them, rank them, rate them. The hobby supplies, list them, rank them. Information getting to them. The apps for card comping and card, whatever it is you want to do with your cards. The grading systems, I think you get my point. Why don't we have that in the hobby? Who's going to start it with me? Who wants to start a hobby site, a website that goes through all the different categories, all the features, all the pros and cons that compare everything? Who wants to do it? Who's with me? I'm like Jerry Maguire holding my goldfish saying, who's coming with me? Because again, what I am getting really frustrated with is the complaining. We need solutions. And one of the solutions that is needed the most, is accountability. It's accountability. And right now, there's not a central place, a central location where we can all go to compare everything. And I don't understand why not. We need consumer reports for the hobby. And I don't know what to say. Well, Greg, you should do it. That's a great idea. And I think my response is going to be what the response of everyone else would be is, we'll win. What am I going to cut back on to make this happen? I want to be a part of it. But I can't be the person in the driver's seat. I can provide ideas. I can provide input. I can provide experience. I mean, isn't there some unemployed, college grad who's a SQL programmer who has web design abilities who wants to do this? I mean, where is that person? Because we need accountability. And there has to be a way that we can start to consolidate all of the information. And I think that part of that is what Jeremy Lee's book is going to be. I do think that's probably part of it. But we'll see. I haven't read it. We'll see. I look forward to reading it. So, I have a different question for this week. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on this one. We are in December. 2025 is almost over. So my question to you is this. As 2025 comes to a close, what is your biggest sports card hobby prediction for 2026? What is your biggest prediction for the hobby for 2026? Get out those crystal balls. Get out those magic 8 balls. Shake them out. Look inside and tell me what you see. The last month has been a wild ride. We've had a year's worth of news in November. So what's going to happen in 2026? Share your predictions down below, and I look forward to sharing those next week. And hey, in a year, we'll come back and we'll look and we'll see what we said and we'll see how it played out. So this is your opportunity to go on the record with what is going to be in store for 2026.